I walked through the front door and immediately noticed how my wife and her friend fell into an oddly secretive mood. Before I entered, I could hear them talking loudly, almost excitedly, but the moment they realized I was home, their voices dropped to a careful whisper. I did not appreciate this sudden shift in tone, and I intended to find out what they were hiding. I asked them directly what the conversation was about. They tried to dismiss my question by claiming they had simply spoken too loudly. Their explanation sounded hollow. I pressed the matter, making it clear I wanted a proper response. My wife's friend looked uneasy, but neither of them offered a genuine answer. As soon as her friend left, I confronted my wife again. Her evasiveness was unacceptable. She mentioned a significant problem that required a specific individual's assistance. Apparently, she and her friend had arranged something behind my back, something she refused to clarify. I wanted to know what kind of trouble she had gotten herself into, but her stubborn attitude blocked every direct inquiry. She told me this issue would be resolved once certain steps were taken. According to her, no one else was supposed to know any details until the right moment arrived. I saw no logic in such secrecy, but I knew pressing her further tonight would achieve nothing. She clung to her silence with determination. She informed me that I would need to drive her to some location the following day and then pick her up afterward. Her tone implied that I should not question this arrangement. I did not like being kept in the dark, yet I understood that pushing her again now would lead nowhere. I made it clear I expected honest answers sooner or later. My patience was running thin. I told her straight that I wanted clarity, but she brushed off my demands as if I were overreacting. She promised that once everything was done, she would explain it properly. Her calm confidence suggested she believed I had no choice but to comply. Despite my irritation, I saw no benefit in continuing the confrontation tonight. My wife was set on keeping these details from me until she decided the time was right. There was no fear in her manner, only a controlled reluctance to share anything beyond vague hints. In the end, she repeated that I would not get a word out of her until she finished what needed to be done and that I should not worry. Without another option, I let the matter rest for the moment. I went to bed aware that something important was unfolding, even though I had no idea what it was. I woke up to her urgent voice cutting through my sleep, telling me to get ready immediately. She stood by the bed in an outfit that left little to the imagination, short skirt, revealing top, clearly dressed for something out of the ordinary. I had no idea why she had chosen such attire or why we had to rush, but she insisted we had to leave right now. I pulled myself together, put on some decent clothes, and followed her out the door without getting a straight answer. We got into the car, and she gave me an address without providing any explanation. I drove while she remained quiet, focused, and a bit tense. The route took us across town to a neighborhood filled with expensive boutiques and luxury cars. Eventually, I spotted the destination, the high-end restaurant, the kind where just looking at the place could cost a fortune. She got out swiftly, and before I could say a word, her friend appeared as if on cue. Both of them disappeared inside, leaving me on the sidewalk wondering what in the world was going on. I refused to sit out there like a fool, so I followed them quietly, keeping enough distance not to be noticed. Once inside, I realized just how upscale this place was. The decor dripped with elegance, even the waiters looked like they belonged on magazine covers. Not wanting to draw attention, I found a seat near a window and ordered the cheapest item on the menu. The prices made my head spin, but I needed an excuse to linger. From my vantage point, I saw my wife and her friend at a table with two men in tailored suits. One of these men had his hand over the friend's, behaving as if they were close, while the other leaned in toward my wife, talking in a low but intense tone. I couldn't make out their words, but their posture and gestures suggested they were discussing something significant. After a while, their conversation loosened, laughter broke out, and they appeared comfortable with one another. I took a few discreet photos with my phone, making sure to capture their faces and their seating arrangement. I didn't know what it all meant, but I wanted evidence. This situation was too strange to ignore. I stayed long enough to confirm I wasn't misinterpreting the scene, then quietly left, returning to the car. The whole thing left me with more questions than answers. I waited in the driver's seat, checking the time, pondering the absurdity of it all. Eventually, she called me, asking to be picked up. When she got back in the car, I looked at her and asked what this was about. She didn't seem rattled. Instead, she said that once we were home, she'd finally explained something that would shock me. I found her calm confidence unsettling. I kept my reply short, telling her that she had better have a good explanation. She just smirked and said we would talk soon. She seemed more relieved than anxious, as though the meeting inside had gone exactly as planned. I noticed she was still dressed to impress, and I wondered why such an outfit had been necessary. With the tension thick in the air and my suspicions growing by the minute, I drove us away from that exclusive restaurant. She remained silent, just staring out the window as if lost in thought. I turned the car toward home, determined to get real answers. We left the city lights behind us, heading back to the privacy of our own place, where I expected the truth to finally emerge. I raised my voice the instant we entered the house, demanding to know what the hell she had been doing in that restaurant with those men and her friend. She asked if I had followed her, and I did not bother denying it. I reminded her of how strangely she had behaved lately and made it clear I was not going to let this slide. She seemed unfazed, pulling something from her bag while telling me to listen closely. She handed me a folded note. Inside it described how she once made a serious mistake at work, something that allowed a colleague to blackmail her. He had threatened to report her slip-up to her boss unless she went out with him. I felt anger at the idea of some lowlife cornering her like that, especially after I had helped secure her position at the very same company. I asked why she had not informed me earlier. I could have handled that worm directly. She shrugged, saying he got himself fired right after she lost her job, so it was no longer a concern. I demanded to know how this tied into the secretive meeting at the fancy restaurant. She explained that, being unemployed now with the holidays approaching, she needed a new source of income. Since expenses would pile up and gifts had to be bought, she had asked her friend for help in landing another position. The gathering I witnessed was some sort of preliminary introduction, arranged to give her a shot at a role somewhere else. The details remained vague, but apparently, this was all part of a bigger scheme her friend had in mind. I wanted concrete information. She claimed not to know the exact nature of the new job yet. Apparently, those men at the restaurant were connected to something her friend was orchestrating. Her friend assured her that everything would be revealed eventually, just not right now. I did not like the secrecy, but I could not force information out of thin air. She mentioned that next weekend we were expected to travel to a countryside property owned by her friend. There, the entire plan would become clear. According to her, this was just the next step, and I needed to be patient. She gave me no reason why we had to do it this way, no justification for the odd process. The story sounded strange, but she insisted we wait and see. I asked her why everything had to be so complicated. She only repeated that the friend called all the shots. Apparently, the friend wanted to keep this recruitment process discreet. My wife was convinced it would pay off, that it would solve our financial worries, and that the final explanation would justify the current uncertainty. I could tell she was relieved to have confessed at least a part of it, even if the explanation was incomplete. She appeared confident that soon I would understand, and that all my questions would be answered if I remained calm. I disliked the feeling of being led along without clarity, but I had no immediate leverage. Eventually, I accepted that I would get nothing more out of her tonight. She made it clear that no matter how hard I pushed, she would not elaborate further. I realized I would have to wait until that weekend gathering to see what awaited us. With no better option, I turned in for the night, going to bed with this lingering mystery on my mind, finding it all disturbingly strange. I approached that week with suspicion, trying to extract more details from both my wife and her friend. Each attempt at gathering information met the same polite refusal, as if both of them were following a script designed to keep me in the dark. They insisted it was all a matter of timing and that the wrong ears could derail whatever they were planning. It felt as though everyone was in on the secret except for me, yet my wife kept insisting everything was moral and legal, urging me not to worry. Finally, the decisive day arrived. My wife dressed provocatively once again, choosing a miniskirt and a blouse that caught the eye. In contrast, I stuck to a neat shirt and trousers, aiming for a more understated look. We drove out to her friend's countryside home, following directions that led us to a large property. The driveway was filled with cars, and as we approached on foot, we realized it was some kind of party. Her friend must have planned a sizable gathering, and everyone seemed comfortable, as if they belonged there. Once we stepped inside, those two men from the restaurant immediately surrounded my wife, showering her with compliments. They seemed pleased to see her dressed as she was, but when I joined them, their smiles lost some enthusiasm. I mentioned the restaurant encounter, and they acknowledged it casually. According to them, tonight would determine my wife's professional fate. I asked what sort of position we were discussing, but they deflected, saying she would explain later because the exact role depended on the rank they decided for her. Apparently, numerous candidates were present, and everyone was being evaluated in this unorthodox manner. I questioned why they didn't hold a formal interview. One man gave a dismissive reply: official processes attracted too many pretentious applicants who flashed degrees and credentials without revealing their true selves. Here, among drinks and laughter, they believed a person's character emerged more honestly. I found their logic dubious, but no one else seemed troubled. Before I could dig deeper, my wife's friend called her away. As I tried to follow, I was politely but firmly asked to wait. When I protested, her friend reminded me that if I wanted my wife to land the job, I had to trust the process. I stood there, arms crossed, listening to distant voices behind closed doors. After a while, my wife returned, beaming. She announced that she would be a senior client manager. Her excitement was genuine. The two men congratulated her, confirming that she had a special assignment lined up. I pressed for details, but my wife only promised to explain everything at home. For now, she wanted to enjoy the evening. We mingled with others, but no one provided any concrete information about the organization. They all seemed to have shown up for the same reasons as we had, curious and hopeful, yet no one had clear answers. It was a strange atmosphere, lively, festive, but lacking substance. I made small talk, observed the crowd, and tried to spot any clues, but nothing stood out besides the veil of secrecy. After what felt like hours of meaningless chatter, we decided to leave. The night sky had turned dark, and the conversations were turning repetitive. As we left the property, my wife's enthusiasm was unshaken. She got into the car talking about the great things that awaited her. I started the engine, guiding us back to familiar roads, while she smiled and hinted at future accomplishments. On the drive home, she reiterated that this was a significant turning point. She claimed that soon I would see what a great opportunity this was, that all the hush-hush arrangements would make sense. I listened quietly, still uncertain about the nature of this so-called senior manager role. By the time we reached home, she radiated confidence, insisting that we were on the brink of something big. I confronted her the moment I got the chance, demanding she drop the riddles and explain precisely what was happening. I wanted to know about her new title, the nature of this secretive department, and why everything had to be arranged in such an unconventional manner. She glanced at me, taking a moment before speaking. According to her, the company's internal policies demanded a high level of discretion. The department she claimed to be joining was apparently notorious for keeping its activities under wraps. I asked what kind of organization this was, but she gave me a vague response. She said it involved arranging certain things, some type of events or projects. She wasn't entirely sure. The role of senior manager sounded impressive, but I still had no clue what her real responsibilities would be. She insisted that on Monday morning, when she officially started, everything would be clarified. I didn't like waiting, but that seemed to be a theme with this job. I inquired about the salary. Her lips curled into a confident smile as she confirmed that the pay would be generous, more than enough for us to enjoy a comfortable Christmas. She seemed pleased that our financial concerns would be alleviated, acting as if this secretive arrangement was perfectly normal. I didn't appreciate being kept in the dark, but her certainty left me little room to argue. If the money was good, maybe I could endure the wait a bit longer. She tried to cut the conversation short by pointing out the late hour and the need for rest. Apparently, she had to be up at 6 in the morning to travel across town and meet someone who would guide her through the new environment. I asked why she needed to leave so early, and she replied that it would take time to commute and get oriented. The mention of meeting some person who would show her everything sounded ambiguous, but I held my tongue. I watched her as she began preparing for bed, seemingly unconcerned by my doubts. She had a calm demeanor, which was both reassuring and frustrating. I wanted concrete answers, yet all I got were hints that I should relax and trust the process. That wasn't my style, but pushing further would likely get me nowhere tonight. As we slipped under the covers, I noticed she was not anxious. Instead, she acted as if tomorrow would simply be another step toward something beneficial. She assured me that we would have more clarity, news, and, as she teased, even gossip soon enough. I tried to figure out what kind of field demanded such secrecy and such odd recruitment methods, but I kept my speculations to myself. The darkness of the bedroom and the quiet of the night left my mind restless. I thought about the individuals we met, the strange party in the countryside, the supposed job interview that involved alcohol and indirect evaluations. Nothing about it aligned with my understanding of how businesses operated. Yet, here she was, confident and certain that everything would become obvious soon. Finally, I stopped trying to piece it all together. I knew I wouldn't find answers by chasing them in my head. If tomorrow promised revelations, I would see what the morning brought. For now, I accepted that I was dealing with an unusual situation. I fell asleep wondering how all this secrecy and that so-called special assignment would unfold in the days ahead. I woke up alone, finding only a note informing me that breakfast waited on the stove. The room felt oddly quiet without her around. I noticed her side of the bed had been left in a hurry, blankets tossed aside, pillows misplaced. In the kitchen, the food still had some warmth, though she was long gone. I tried not to overthink it, but something felt off. I moved toward the closet to check if she had taken something specific, hoping for a clue. Inside the wardrobe, I realized several items were missing. Most noticeably, a particularly intimate dress and a set of lace underwear were nowhere to be found. I didn't recall her mentioning any special outing that would require such attire. Unable to ignore this, I grabbed my phone and called her. On the other end, I heard a cacophony of voices, background noise that made it impossible to have a proper conversation. She cut me off, saying she had a serious problem and would explain everything later. That response irritated me. I ended the call, trying to make sense of the situation. I briefly turned to a group chat with some trusted friends, sharing my confusion. Unfortunately, that only stirred more questions. They offered guesses, none of which helped. My frustration grew, but there was nothing I could do except wait. Eventually, I decided to keep calm until she returned. There was no point in letting speculation get out of hand. After what felt like ages, she finally came home. I wasted no time demanding she strip down, expecting to confirm if she had worn that missing lingerie. She looked at me as if I were out of my mind and explained that the items were simply tossed into the laundry basket while she picked out clothes this morning. Her tone implied I was overreacting. She accused me of turning every small detail into a huge issue, and I gave a curt reply, telling her that her behavior was causing all these suspicions. Realizing I wouldn't get anywhere fighting about garments, I pressed her for the promised explanation. She said she had been assigned to organize some top-notch event, a secret one, of course. She claimed it was all part of her new job's responsibilities. I didn't even bother expressing surprise. By now, I expected nothing less than mysterious tasks. She told me a corporate event was coming up soon, and they intended to surprise her as part of it. I listened silently, curious about what else would surface. She mentioned the same countryside house we had visited before. Apparently, we would be heading there again together. I tried to guess what might be planned this time, but she offered no further details. Instead, she painted a picture of a special evening ahead, something that would supposedly stand out from previous encounters. She acted as if I should be impressed, but I kept my opinions to myself. The conversation ended with her insisting that this upcoming night would be remarkable. She suggested that once we got there, everything would make sense, and I would see her new position in a completely different light. I had heard this sort of promise before, so I reserved judgment until I saw actual proof. Still, the fact that she sounded genuinely convinced intrigued me. With the day drawing to a close, we had reached another uncertain pause. She expressed confidence that the evening event would impress us both. I remained cautious, yet I admitted to myself that I wanted to see what these people had up their sleeves. As night settled in, I couldn't help wondering what kind of surprise they intended to present in her honor, and how it would fit into all this secrecy. I came home after my shift, expecting a quick break, when she rushed in telling me to hurry. Apparently, she had stayed longer at work than planned, and now we were running late for something she considered important. I had barely changed out of my work clothes before we were back on the road, heading toward that same countryside house where strange events had unfolded before. I didn't know what to expect this time, but I kept my irritation in check, determined to see what new surprises awaited us. As soon as we stepped through the door, a burst of confetti and the pop of party favors greeted us. Balloons floated overhead, and the room hummed with excitement. People stood around holding glasses of champagne, congratulating my wife as if she had just won some kind of grand prize. It felt like an over-the-top celebration, one I hadn't asked for and didn't fully understand. Still, I tried to observe quietly, noticing how these same faces from before looked even more enthusiastic tonight. We mingled for a few minutes, receiving nods and smiles, while my wife basked in the attention. Then one of the men who had supposedly facilitated her new job climbed onto a table and announced something that made me freeze in disbelief. He called out to everyone, proclaiming that it was time for a swinger party. Before I could process his words, some guests began removing their clothing, turning the atmosphere from festive to something far more unsettling. I refused to stand by and watch this spectacle. I grabbed my wife's hand, led her toward the door, and didn't bother pretending everything was fine. She tried to protest, saying we had no obligation to participate. I shot back, asking if she was out of her mind. We hadn't signed up for this. As we slipped out, people were already calling her name, urging her to return. She brushed them off, claiming I didn't feel well, and we disappeared into the night. Back home, she confronted me, stating that I'd acted hastily. According to her, we could have stayed without engaging in anything questionable. I disagreed, reminding her that my boundaries were not open for negotiation. The idea that we should even be present at such a scene disgusted me. She looked offended, as if my refusal made me the unreasonable one, rather than the twisted event we had just witnessed. She insisted that her assignment needed completing, that whatever odd arrangement she had with this company was too important to discard after one unsettling evening. I told her I did not want her going back to a place that organized such nonsense. She didn't like my ultimatum. I could see it in her eyes. It wasn't the first time we had clashed over her new job's secrecy and bizarre social scenes, and I doubted it would be the last. Still, she was determined. She felt obligated to meet their expectations and deliver on whatever task they had given her. Whether it was misguided pride or financial incentive, she refused to entertain the thought of leaving so soon. I stood firm in my disapproval, making my stance clear, though I knew my opposition wouldn't magically change her mind. In the end, she gave me a look that mixed frustration and hurt. She said, "Okay, but I must finish my assignment. I got this job, and I am not going to quit after a week." A couple of calm days passed, and I decided to check on the progress of that so-called assignment. I cornered her in the living room, asking outright what was going on. She responded calmly, claiming that her project was still in progress and insisting she'd provide more details later. According to her, the entire team had come up with some serious concepts and they were refining the final plan. I tried to extract specifics, but she deflected, suggesting it would all make sense once completed. I reminded her that her recent behavior had been growing increasingly suspicious, especially after witnessing the surreal fiasco at that so-called corporate event. I told her plainly that the whole situation made me uneasy. She dismissed my concerns, stating that fools existed everywhere and that not every event defined the true nature of her job. Apparently, the inappropriate gathering was just a random hiccup in an otherwise respectable workplace. She maintained that her new role demanded extra hours. She mentioned that she'd have to stay late at the office for about a week. Long shifts, missed dinners, and late returns became our new routine. Each evening she came home tired, claiming the workload was intense. I tried not to pry every single time, but her guarded silence didn't put my mind at ease. Throughout that week, I observed the pattern: she left early and returned well after sunset. When I asked if everything was all right, she repeated that all would be revealed once this major undertaking concluded. I got no details about the nature of the assignment. She never mentioned the names of clients, never described the tasks involved, never explained the actual responsibilities of this senior manager position. As the days dragged on, I noticed her excitement intensifying. Her demeanor changed from being merely secretive to showing a kind of eagerness, as if waiting for a grand finale. She hinted at something big happening soon, and while it didn't erase my doubts, it certainly piqued my curiosity. I kept my skepticism under control, choosing to observe rather than argue. By the end of the week, she finally announced that the following day would be the last and most significant stage of her assignment. She spoke with a confidence that bordered on smugness, as if certain that the outcome would exceed expectations. I pressed for details, but she held her ground, refusing to spoil the surprise. It was always just one more day until I understood everything. She emphasized that tomorrow's event would be a large-scale affair, one that she would personally oversee. According to her, the success of this final phase would prove her capabilities in front of the right people. I tried to imagine what sort of corporate environment arranged its promotions and evaluations in such a cryptic manner, but I knew I would get no answers that night. Before turning in, she dropped one last hint to fuel my anticipation. She mentioned that, if all went well, there might even be a substantial raise waiting for her once it was over. She sounded thrilled at the prospect, leaving me standing there, filled with questions. "Just wait until tomorrow," she said. "I'll have so much to tell you." I arrived home from work that evening, wondering why she had not returned yet. The house felt unusually silent, and the absence of any message or call from her only intensified my uneasy feeling. I tried calling her phone, but she never picked up. The hours dragged on, and just as I was beginning to consider searching the city for her, she stumbled through the front door, completely drenched in some white substance, obviously drunk beyond reason. She didn't say a word, didn't meet my eyes, just staggered straight to the bedroom and collapsed onto the bed without removing her soiled clothes. I stood there, stunned, trying to make sense of her condition. My patience had worn thin long ago. I couldn't ignore the stench of alcohol and whatever else coated her. I took a deep breath and reached for her phone, determined to find an explanation. Scrolling through her messages and group chats, I discovered the truth that had been dancing around my suspicions for weeks. She wasn't working in an ordinary company. She had been organizing swinger parties, events that bordered on running a full-blown brothel. The chats were explicit and unapologetic. Guests praised her performance, commending her skills with her mouth without any shame or subtlety. It became clear this was no occasional slip, she had embraced this lifestyle fully. The job she had so proudly described, the secrecy, the bizarre interviews, and those late nights all pointed to one thing: this had been her world. The party we had fled before was not a glitch in a normal career, but a glimpse of her actual profession. Among the exchanged messages, I found something even more devastating: a video file. It showed her cheating on me in front of the entire office, taking center stage without hesitation. I watched in growing disgust and anger, realizing that every bit of trust one had given her was wasted. My wife, who had promised me explanation someday, had known all along what she was doing. There had been no misunderstanding, no temporary confusion. She was committed to this filthy double life. I refused to stay in the same house with her belongings. I opened our closet, pulled out her clothes, shoes, and personal effects, and stuffed them into trash bags. Every piece I tossed into those sacks represented another piece of falsehood, another memory tainted by her betrayal. By the time I was done, I felt only grim resolve, no regret. Her choices had made this inevitable. Morning came, and she woke up, still hazy, asking what was wrong. Her voice carried a tone of annoyance rather than remorse. I confronted her with what I knew, my voice flat and cold. Did she seriously not understand the magnitude of her actions, her infidelity, her public acts, her sick line of work? She seemed irritated by my reaction, as if I were the irrational one. No apology crossed her lips, no sign of shame. Instead, she grew angry, snapping back that I simply didn't get it. She insisted that she enjoyed what she did, that this lifestyle appealed to her. She seemed offended that I dared question her behavior, as if I were intruding on her personal freedom. Every word she spat at me made it clearer that our marriage meant nothing to her, that she valued these parties and that twisted community more than any bond we once shared. I had heard enough. I told her to leave. If she found pleasure in that world, she could go live in it permanently. There would be no more tolerance under my roof. She hurled one last remark: "You don't understand, and I like it. So stay out of my business." With that, I forced her out of the door, slamming it shut behind her, cutting her off from everything we had built together. After discovering the extent of her deceit, I knew I had to take decisive action. The betrayal was not only personal but also implicated a larger, more sinister operation. My first step was to consult with a lawyer who specialized in corporate misconduct and personal defamation. I contacted a reputable attorney, someone with a proven track record in handling cases against powerful organizations. Scheduling a meeting, I prepared all the evidence I had gathered, including the incriminating messages and the video of her actions at the swinger parties. During our initial consultation, I laid out the situation in detail. My lawyer listened attentively, taking notes and asking pertinent questions to fully understand the scope of the case. We discussed the legal ramifications of her involvement in organizing swinger parties that resembled a brothel. He explained the potential charges and the strength of our case based on the evidence available. With his expertise, we formulated a strategy to hold not only my wife accountable but also the higher-ups running the operation. It was clear that bringing them to justice would require thorough investigation and unwavering determination. Together, we began the process of gathering more information about the company she worked for. My lawyer utilized his network to access public records, business registrations, and any available information on the key individuals involved. We identified the main executives and the owner of the company, uncovering a web of deceit and illegal activities. This research was painstaking but necessary to build a solid case. Each piece of information we uncovered strengthened our position, revealing the depth of corruption and exploitation within the organization. Armed with substantial evidence, we filed a lawsuit against the company and its top officials. The legal documents outlined the charges of operating an illicit brothel, fraud, and defamation. My lawyer ensured that every claim was supported by the evidence we had meticulously collected. The court accepted our case, and proceedings began. Throughout the legal battle, my focus remained clear: to dismantle the corrupt organization and seek justice for the wrongs committed against me and others affected by their actions. As the lawsuit progressed, the company attempted to defend itself, but the evidence was overwhelming. Witness testimonies, financial records, and the damning video evidence painted a clear picture of their illicit operations. My lawyer presented a compelling case, methodically dismantling their defenses. The court sessions were intense, but our preparation paid off. The judge recognized the severity of their crimes and the impact they had on individuals like myself. The legal system worked in our favor, ensuring that justice was pursued relentlessly. Simultaneously, I initiated divorce proceedings against my wife. The betrayal was irreparable, and continuing the marriage was untenable. My lawyer handled the divorce with the same professionalism, ensuring that all legal grounds were firmly established. We filed for dissolution based on her infidelity and involvement in illegal activities, which had irreversibly damaged our relationship. The process was straightforward, given the clear evidence of her misconduct. The court granted the divorce swiftly, finalizing the end of our marriage without unnecessary delays. With both the lawsuit against the company and the divorce finalized, significant changes began to take shape. The court ordered the closure of the company's operations, halting their illegal activities permanently. The executives were held accountable for their roles in the brothel and related crimes. This victory not only provided personal closure but also served as a deterrent against similar illicit operations in the future. The legal battles were exhausting, but the outcomes were just necessary for moving forward. In the end, I successfully sued my wife, leading to a divorce that was both legally binding and emotionally liberating. The courtroom confirmed my decision was right, allowing me to reclaim my life from the turmoil she had caused. The closure of the company marked the end of a dark chapter, ensuring that such exploitation would not continue unchecked. With the legal matters resolved, I began to rebuild my life, focusing on stability and integrity, free from the deceit and chaos that had once dominated it. The next morning, my phone rang, displaying my wife's name. I answered promptly, expecting another attempt to manipulate me. Instead, she launched into a tirade, calling me the worst person in the world. She accused me of causing numerous people to lose their jobs, painting me as a villain in her narrative. I remained calm, responding firmly that I had no intention of saving her or protecting her from the consequences of her actions. If others chose to leave or were dismissed because of her, that was their decision to make. She continued her onslaught, vowing that I would face severe repercussions for my actions. She threatened to ruin my reputation and career, insisting that I would regret the choices I had made. Her voice was filled with anger and bitterness, but I didn't let it shake my resolve. I reiterated that her threats were baseless and that I had no interest in maintaining any form of relationship with someone who chose to live so destructively. Over the following weeks, her attempts to sabotage me became relentless. She spread false rumors at my workplace, claiming that I was responsible for the recent layoffs and that I had been unethical in my dealings. These accusations were entirely unfounded, but her reputation and connections made it difficult to address them immediately. I documented every instance of her slander, gathering evidence to counter her lies. I decided to confront the issue head-on by scheduling a meeting with my HR department. Presenting the evidence I had collected, I clearly demonstrated that the layoffs were part of a broader company restructuring and had nothing to do with my performance or integrity. My record showed that my work had been exemplary, and several colleagues vouched for my professionalism. The HR team appreciated my transparency and assured me they would investigate her claims thoroughly. Meanwhile, she escalated her tactics by sending defamatory messages to mutual friends and acquaintances, accusing me of various professional and personal failings. Each slanderous statement was a deliberate attempt to isolate me and tarnish my image. I reached out to these individuals personally, providing context and proof of my actual contributions and character. Most people were shocked to hear her accusations and supported me once they understood the truth. Determined to protect my reputation, I also took legal action against her for defamation. My lawyer advised that with the evidence I had compiled, we stood a strong chance of winning the case. We filed the necessary paperwork, outlining how her false statements had caused significant harm to my personal and professional life. The legal proceedings were straightforward, and the court acknowledged the validity of my claims, ruling in my favor. Throughout this ordeal, I maintained my focus and integrity. I continued to perform my duties diligently at work, ensuring that no opportunity existed for her to undermine me further. My consistent performance and the support from my colleagues eventually silenced her baseless accusations. The legal system worked as intended, providing justice and restoring my good name. In the end, my persistence paid off. The court dismissed all of her defamatory claims and awarded me damages for the distress and harm she had caused. Her attempts to ruin my life were unsuccessful, and she faced legal consequences for her actions. With the situation resolved, I was able to move forward, free from her malicious interference. My efforts to defend myself and uphold my integrity ensured that her efforts to destroy me had ultimately failed. After the tumultuous events that had unfolded, I knew that simply moving on was not enough. The evidence I had uncovered about her involvement in the swinger parties and the defamatory video needed to be addressed decisively. I decided that the only way to ensure she could no longer wreak havoc on my life was to expose her actions to everyone she knew. Gathering all the necessary files and the incriminating video, I meticulously compiled them to present a clear and undeniable case against her. My goal was not just revenge, but to protect others from falling victim to her manipulative and deceitful behavior. Once I had everything in order, I began reaching out to her closest acquaintances and family members. I sent the video along with a detailed explanation of her actions, making sure to highlight the truth behind her facade. Each message was carefully crafted to ensure that the recipients understood the gravity of the situation without any ambiguity. I knew this would sever the ties she had so effortlessly manipulated, but I felt it was a necessary step to reclaim my life and integrity. The process was methodical, ensuring that no one was left unaware of the deception I had endured. The aftermath was swift and undeniable. Friends who once trusted and supported her began to distance themselves, unable to reconcile the person they thought they knew with the reality of her actions. Family members expressed shock and disappointment, their disbelief mirroring my own. Social circles that had once been intertwined with hers now became fractured and strained. It was painful to witness the unraveling of her relationships, but each severed bond was a step towards liberation from the chaos she had instilled in our lives. Her reputation was irrevocably tarnished, leaving her isolated and vulnerable. Realizing that her departure from my life was imminent, I made the decision to sell our home. The house, once a symbol of our shared future, had become a battleground of lies and deceit. Listing the property was a straightforward process, facilitated by the undeniable proof of her actions that now justified the need for a clean break. The sale proceeded smoothly, and with the proceeds, I purchased a new residence in a different neighborhood. This move was not just physical but symbolic, representing my commitment to starting anew without the shadows of our past haunting me. In my new home, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. The environment was fresh, untouched by the turmoil that had characterized my previous life. I focused on rebuilding, both personally and professionally, channeling my energy into positive endeavors. The support from true friends and the newfound distance from her influence allowed me to heal and regain my confidence. It was a period of introspection and growth, where I could finally see a path forward without the constant reminders of betrayal. Throughout this transition, I maintained a clear and focused mindset. Every decision I made was aimed at solidifying my independence and ensuring that I would never be entangled in such a web of deceit again. I surrounded myself with people who valued honesty and integrity, fostering relationships built on trust and mutual respect. This network became my foundation, providing the stability and encouragement I needed to thrive. The experience had taught me the importance of resilience and the strength that comes from overcoming adversity. As time passed, the scars of the past began to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and determination. I pursued new interests and career opportunities, embracing the freedom that came with my separation from her influence. The challenges I had faced only made me stronger, reinforcing my belief in taking control of my own destiny. Each day was a testament to my ability to rise above the circumstances that once threatened to define me. I was no longer a victim of her schemes, but a man who had reclaimed his life through sheer will and perseverance. In the final stages of this journey, I realized that the most important question had been answered: how could I rebuild my life after such profound betrayal? The answer was clear and unequivocal. By taking decisive action, standing up for myself, and not allowing her actions to dictate my future, I had successfully navigated the darkest moments of my life. The closure I achieved was complete, paving the way for a future defined by strength, integrity, and unwavering resolve. My life had transformed from one of turmoil to one of empowerment, proving that with determination and courage, it is possible to overcome even the most challenging of circumstances.